Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Marsha Butler, the webinar director at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guests and get started, I need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you today's educational presentation. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box. If we're not able to get to your question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number as well, and we'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event to make sure that gets addressed. Again, we want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. I'd love to introduce you to our presenter today. Will Smith is the owner of Innovative Financial Solutions, which provides holistic financial planning focused on helping clients clarify, identify, and simplify the process of achieving their life goals, and that which is most important to them through intentional engagement, systematic implementation, and results-focused planning of their financial resources. And Will, I know we've had you on before talking about mindset and money. So if you're looking for another webinar by Will, just type mindset and money in our search bar on our webinars, and you'd be happy to have you look at that recording. But this is also kind of part of that series as well. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over the time to you. Really looking forward to today's webinar.
Thank you, Marsha, and I echo what you said about looking at that other webinar, Money and Mindset, because they are definitely connected. That's sort of a foundation to the series that we're doing. So a lot of that information will help to understand what's being communicated today, because today what we're going to talk about is principles for success financially. And these are things that really are considered to be basic things that you really need to have in place as it pertains to the foundation of establishing how you do what you do relating to your money. So let's get moving. These basic things that we need to have in place are, as you see here, establishing priorities, building discipline, and using a system. Now, when we talk about these three things, they are all interconnected. They're not items that stand alone. They're all interconnected. For example, a person can't keep priorities or even understand how to establish priorities if they're not disciplined. They just, it can't work if they're not operating together, okay? And then, of course, having discipline and having priorities are essential in helping to understand how to use a system. So we're going to get into first talking about establishing priorities, because that's a starting point. Now, if you look at the previous video that webinar that we talked about, which is Money and Mindset, one of the things that you will see in that webinar is it talks about goals. Okay, so we're not going to talk a lot about that here, but goals are something that you should have as well, because then you establish the priorities as to which goals are priority, of course. But as this statement here says, you show me where a person's spends their time and money, and I'll show you what their priorities are. Okay. I mean, that's just the bottom line. We can say things are important to us. We can say things are a priority to us, but where do we invest our time and where do we invest our money? Because those two resources are probably the two most valuable natural resources that we have in the earth: time and money. Okay. One, of course, we can't get back, time, but money lost in conjunction with time could also be very, very, very difficult to get back. And so want to highlight that. And what this says here is the telltale, and I'll give you an example of that. What you choose to do over the things you don't do, except for when influenced or urged by others, are the things that are your priorities. So let's use an example. If you are in a situation where you have a choice between going to a concert to see your favorite entertainer or singer or whoever, or having to go to a dental appointment, okay? The choice you make is going to be a reflection of what you prioritize. It's just that simple. It may cost you $200-300 to go to this dental appointment, and you may not have enough money to go to the dental appointment and to go to this concert, because this concert may only going to be this one particular day. It's not going to, your favorite entertainer is not going to be around for another, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in this area or something, and you don't want to miss it, and you don't have the ability to do both situations. What are you going to do? You're going to do what you prioritize. And that's how we know what our priorities are. And so that's why I said, show me where a person spends their money and their time, and I will show you what their priorities are. Okay. So I'll give you another example real quick. I think this is an important example. If a parent says, my child's college education is a priority, and the child gets to be 16, 15, 17, 18 years old, and the child's college fund is $5,000, $10,000, but the parent over that child's lifetime has had 4 luxury cars of $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 each, then what that parent is really saying is that the image for the type of vehicle that they drive is more of a priority than their child's college education, right? So there's just a couple of examples. It's not a matter of judgment. It's a matter of that's what the person's demonstrated priorities are. So I'm not deciding what's right and what's wrong. I'm just stating the facts, okay? Now, when we talk about establishing priorities, we make sure we don't confuse priorities with importance, okay? Obligations, responsibilities, and needs must always have a higher priority over likes and wants. Now, that's not always the case. We don't always prioritize needs, responsibilities, and obligations over the things that we want. Hence the example of the car and the college education. And this is very common, okay? Mostly because we haven't been taught to think this way. We live in a society that conditions us to satisfy our impulses. We live in a society where the media, where things that we see in all walks of our everyday travels are constantly promoting self-satisfaction and promoting prioritize satisfying yourself. So we may say that something is a priority, but as we play life out every day, what happens is our reflex behavior kicks in. And before we realize it, we've invested money and time in doing something that isn't a stated priority, but it just so happens to be embedded down on the inside of us, as it pertains to the things that we really, really think are most important. And I'll say this, I shared this with someone in a conversation the other day. If you think about it, as Americans in particular, and this is probably throughout the world now, we value entertainment and recreation almost more than anything else. And if anyone questions that, all you have to do is look at how much an actor, a professional athlete, or entertainer earns annually compared to people like a doctor, school teacher, okay, a firefighter, a police officer. Like, there is no way anyone can argue that what a police officer does, what a firefighter does, what a frontline medical worker does, there's no way that anyone can argue that what they do, the harm that they put themselves in doing their task, the risk that they take every day, and the vitalness of what they do in terms of helping to protect the society and the community that we live in. You can't tell me that those three things that I just named right there aren't of more importance than an entertainer who sings, or an actor who's acting, or an athlete who's playing a sport. Yet, if you look at the amount of money that we spend as a society to fund those things, it's not even close. And that's why the athletes make multi-millions of dollars. That's why the actors make multi-millions of dollars. That's why the entertainers make multi-millions of dollars, singers and what have you. Because as a society, we value that more. And we don't think about it that way, but that's the truth. So when we're talking about priorities and we're talking about, again, being financially successful, we have to develop an ability to break away from that mindset, because the society that we live in pulls us into it, and we oftentimes don't even realize it. Okay, but as we go through here, establishing priorities do some very important things for us. They help us stay on course. They help us to eliminate disorder or conflict. They help us to accomplish what our goals are. Don't let the lack of understanding of others, because other people have different priorities than what you have. So priorities are the result of being organized and understanding authority and learning obedience. Now, sometimes some of these words we perceive as bad words, but they're actually not bad words. They're characteristics of things that we do every day in life, okay? When you drive up and down the street and you come up to a stop sign and you stop, you are obeying the traffic laws. When you go into a grocery store and you get in line and you don't just cut in front of everybody and go to the front of the line, you are being obedient to the rules of order for the grocery store, okay? So the word obedience is not something that's a bad word that's only associated with training dogs or something like that. That's ridiculous, okay? When you go to your job and you do what your supervisor tells you to do, you are operating in obedience to the authority that has been established. So when I mention this, I like to take a little time to say that, because I've had conversations with people who don't like these words for some reason or another. And I'm like, where'd you get this from? Like, somebody has kind of caused you to be off in your thought processes. But I bring this up because once you establish priorities, you, I'm not repeating myself just for the sake of repeating, you have established an authority as it pertains to how you want to govern your life. Now, you are the authority. Are you able to exercise obedience to your own authority? Are you able to exercise obedience to your own authority? I know people who have trouble with that. So again, I'll use another example. I've had situations where I've known people who struggle to manage their money, and they get a certain amount of money to do something, and they ask someone else to hold the money for them to make sure that they don't spend it. You know why? Because they don't trust themselves. Because they know that in the past, they have not been obedient to their own authority. When that situation occurs, what that person has done is taken the responsibility to put themselves in a situation where some other authority is able to protect them from themselves. Okay. But the ideal arrangement is that you would be able to trust yourself and be able to operate under, again, the circumstances that you establish or that we establish for ourselves. So that requires for us to build discipline. And discipline is a result of practiced obedience. Once you have obeyed something consistently for a duration of time and have developed an automatic response, we become disciplined to it. Okay. So it's just becoming obedience to a system or pattern of behavior. We often do that by operating in a system. The system helps us to build discipline. So again, using the example of going to work. If we have a job where there are certain things that we do on a regular basis, we have to sign in, we have to, check the emails for instructions or tasks or assignments, or we have to do certain things at certain times. That's a system that we have been put in by our source of employment. We also, operate in other situations where we are in a system. Matter of fact, let's take it into a bigger picture. The world operates in a system. We have a solar system. We have an ecosystem. We have a banking system, right? We have a legal system, right? So we have an educational system, right? So we have a highway system, highway transportation system. So if you think about life in general, everything that we do in terms of the big picture actually is systematized. But we don't think about that in our personal lives, right? But that's the fact. We are disciplined to drive a certain way. We're disciplined to operate a certain way when it comes to going to banks and other things because of the systems that have been established. So we should do that in our own lives because, again, it helps us to build disciplines, helps us to develop routines, forces us to do things in a particular way, and it creates repetition and habit. Most of us probably brush our teeth every day, right? Well, because we have conditioned and disciplined ourselves to do that, right? Most of us get up at a certain time every day, okay? Most of us have dinner at a certain time, okay? Or we eat, right? So systems are things that we utilize on a regular basis, but we're not always conscious of the fact that we do that, right? So that's an important aspect of building discipline. And habits are a result of becoming disciplined. So if a person has bad habits, it's because they have become disciplined to things that they shouldn't do. All right. If a person has good habits, then they have become disciplined to the things that they should do. But habits are a result of becoming conditioned to something, which is a form of discipline. So using a system helps us to build discipline. Now, this is what I want to do. Before we move to the next slide, I want to verify what I just said. Okay. Matter of fact, go ahead to the next slide. So I want to verify what I just said. So I want everyone to pick a number between 0 and 10. And the reason why I want you to pick it between 0 and 10, because I want you to make it easy on yourself, because you're going to have to do a little bit of math. Okay. But pick a number between 0 and 10. Okay. Don't put it in the chat box. Just keep it to yourself at this point. Now, once you pick that number, what I want you to do is double that number. Just multiply it by 2. Okay. Now, after you double that number, I want you to add 10 to it. Okay. So I'm using easy numbers. Hopefully you picked a easy number, but I'm using an easy number to make this process clear. Okay. Now, after you add 10 to the number, I want you to now divide that number by 2. So you pick the number, you doubled the number, you added 10 to the number, and then you divided the number by 2. Now, last step, take the number that you got when you divided by 2 and subtract the original number that you started with from it. So if you started with 2, subtract 2 from the number you got after you divided by 2. If your number was 8, subtract 8 from the number you got after you divided by 2. Okay. Now, what I want everyone to do is put the answer that you got after you subtracted into the chat box. Put the number. Okay. Now,
all right, we're getting lots of
in,
numbers in here.
Okay. Now, everybody can see the numbers all come up to 5. Now, how is it that we have all of these different people who I'm sure didn't all start with the same number? I don't know what number anyone started with. All I did was implement a system. And I know that the number was going to be 5. That's what a system enables you to do. It allows you to create predictable results. It allows you to do things that do not depend on your talent or ability. It allows everybody to achieve a consistent, successful result, regardless of where you start. That's the value of a system. Now, where did the discipline come in? All you had to do was follow the instructions. That's all you had to do was follow the instructions. Now, I have disciplined myself to understand that, and I can do it in multiple ways. I can make the number come out any way that I want to, right? But this is a powerful example of how valuable a system is, right? It helps us to develop discipline, and it creates a predetermined disposition towards learning, carrying out instructions, implementing practices that are intended to protect, preserve, and promote success in our lives, all right? There are other benefits of a system, okay? Let's go on to the next slide. When a person becomes disciplined, they're able to follow a plan without being distracted by the results. They're able to establish and keep priorities without being told, and they're able to operate without supervision or oversight. That's what the value of a discipline is, but that's also what the value of a system does. Because what a system does is it puts things in place so that you can operate in the capacity that I just communicated, right? And That helps you to develop habits. It also helps to take away uncertainty. So as a professional salesperson, what I often do in trainings is I tell them your uncertainty about your earnings are based on the fact oftentimes that you don't have a system in place. But once you have a system in place, the fact that you earn a commission should not make you feel uncomfortable from month to month as it pertains to what your earnings are going to be. So again, for an example, if a salesperson understands that for every 100 calls they make, they go on 10 appointments. And for every 10 appointments they go on, they make 4 sales. Then that person needs to understand that when they wake up in the morning, their goal is not to focus on the 4 sales. Their goal is to focus on the 100 calls. Because if they have a pattern whereby which it demonstrates for every 100 calls they make, they go on 10 appointments, they make 4 sales, then they know every month, if I get up and I make 100 calls, I'm going to see 10 appointments. And these are averages. So sometimes they make 100 calls, they may go on 14 appointments. Sometimes they make 100 calls, they may go on 6 appointments. But if they know that the average is 100, 10, and 4, then they don't have to have any apprehensions about whether or not they're going to generate enough revenue to take care of themselves. They need to have apprehensions about, are they going to get up and go to work like they're supposed to? But that's the value of a system, okay? And once a person in that situation becomes disciplined, they don't have any worries because they understand that their results are not based on some unpredictable, unknown circumstance. It's based on my predictable, regimented behavior. End of story. Okay? So this is the same thing when it comes to finances. If we develop a pattern of behavior in what we do with our finances, how we manage our finances, right? Keeping track of our expenses, monitoring what we spend money on, when we spend money, for what purposes we spend money. If we have a regimented plan of savings, you know, the federal government takes taxes out of our paychecks for a reason. And the reason why they do it is because we're not conditioned to do it. And if we had to take our own taxes out and pay the federal government, the roads wouldn't get built. There wouldn't be any money for federal disaster when hurricanes hit. You know, the military wouldn't get funded because our taxpayers pay our tax dollars pay for all of that stuff, right? There wouldn't be any Social Security. There wouldn't be any Medicare, right? All of the services that we complain about paying taxes for wouldn't, or let me say it a different way. All of the services that are dependent on the taxpayers' dollars would struggle because we're not disciplined as a society to operate that way. And they know that, so that's why they have a system. You go to work for an employer, the employer takes the money out before you get it, sends the taxes into the federal government. That way we can pay our politicians, although I don't know if that's a good idea or not. We can make sure that there's money to fund our militaries, you know, and all of the other things that the government is involved in taking care of for the community benefit, right? Because we're not disciplined to be self-funders. All right, so let's go into the next slide. Here we go. The goal of discipline is to become disciplined. Really simple, right? So when a person becomes disciplined, they don't allow those who are undisciplined to influence them. A person who's disciplined, they always look to authority to guide them. A person who is disciplined understands the value of authority, and they always look to authority to guide them. Give you an example. I'm independent. I am self-employed. I have several businesses. Okay. I have people who are in a position of authority in my life. They don't tell me what to do on a day-to-day basis. They don't give me any regular instructions saying I need to do this way, I need to do this way, I need to do that way. Okay. But they are in place for a reason. And when I need guidance or when I need direction for something, I consult with those authorities because they're in a position to help me. So when I understand authority, I don't look at authority as a barrier to my success or a barrier to my independence. I understand that authority has a position to help me. Disciplined people understand that. Okay. Again, let's use a job as an example. If you're on your job and you have some questions or you're not certain about something, a disciplined person talks to authority. An undisciplined person is more inclined to be a renegade and to do things on their own. Sometimes it may work out, sometimes it may not, right? But a disciplined person typically doesn't operate that way. And they are driven by their commitment to finish what they started, okay? So if a disciplined person says that they're going to do something, I have confidence that it's going to get done. If a undisciplined person tells me that they're going to do something, I hold my breath, because any excuse can cause an undisciplined person to rationalize why they don't need to finish what they started, right? So these are all important characteristics that have to be internalized. This is a way of thinking. If the way of thinking, which connects back up to Mindset and Money webinar, if the way of thinking doesn't get anchored, the behavior can't happen. It's just not possible. Our actions are going to be a reflection of what and how we think. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So what is a system? By definition, a regular method or order. It's a way of doing things in a prescribed manner. It's using a consistent process of operation which is designed to produce predictable results on a consistent basis. Just like the exercise that I did, all right? Anytime you're using a system, it is designed to do these things. And from time to time, yes, the system needs to be tweaked, but here's another value of the system. If any one of you had got that answer wrong and not come up with 5, with a system, what I could have did is went back and said, okay, let's retrace what you did and figure out where the mistake was. So if you came up with the number 8, no, if you started with the number 10, but you didn't come up with the answer 5, then I'll say, okay, let's go back to the beginning. What number did you start with? You say, well, I started with 10. Okay, great. The first step was to double it. So what did you do after that? I said, oh, that's where I made my mistake. Instead of doubling it, I just divided it. I don't know what was going on in my mind. I said, oh, well, that's where your mistake is, right? Anywhere along the way, what a system does is it allows you to identify where the mistake is made and makes it easy for you to correct it. Okay? So there's a great deal of value to operating and understanding what a system is. But here's even more evidence of why a system is important. Okay, let's go to the next slide. It helps you to stay organized. When things are systematized, there is an order, and order is a part of being organized. It keeps you from wasting time and energy. Just compare a person who has a desk or a file cabinet where they have all of their files alphabetized by year, by month, okay? And they need to get a file on Mrs. Smith, who's been a client, since, 8 years. And, they need to go into their file and find some information. Well, if that file is organized, okay, by system, you can go in and say, okay, Mrs. Johnson, here's Mrs. Johnson. Okay, oh yeah, she's been with us since 2016. Okay, so I can go to the 2016 files and say, okay, 2016, Miss Johnson. Oh, okay, yep, this is exactly what we set up for her back in 2016. I got it right here. Now contrast that to somebody who just has piles of paper laying on their desk, or they just have a bunch of folders and file folders where they just put stuff in, but they don't have it labeled and identified. What kind of a chaos is that going to be to try to find something? So it helps you to save time. It helps you to save energy. You do things in a more effective way when you have a system. I stated before, it produces consistent results. It actually helps to build confidence. So right now, none of you have the confidence that you could go and sit in an audience of 500 people and tell them, I can show you an example where I can have all of you all have the exact same number. None of you have the confidence that you could do that right now. But if I teach you the system, you can go in with confidence that you can do the exact same thing. So system helps you to produce confidence, and confidence is very powerful. I don't know if you guys are sports fans, but there's a guy by the name of Mike Tyson many years ago who was knocking everybody out and was terrorizing the boxing world. And a guy by the name of Buster Douglas, who was not ranked, who had never won a title, knocked Mike Tyson out. Why? Because somebody gave him a level of confidence that he can go in and defeat this undefeated terror of a boxer. So confidence is extremely, extremely important, okay? And it reduces the pressure and the fear of failure. If I know what I'm going to do, and I know I have a process for doing it, it helps to reduce the pressure and the fear of failure. It helps me to organize. The organizational process helps me to simplify my life, keeps me protected from burning out. Burnout is a result of inefficient energy being used. Inefficient energy causes us to get tired, to get worn out, to get stressed, and all of the other associated things. So having a system actually helps to eliminate or alleviate that. It helps to keep you stay focused on the goal. Of course, it helps you to maintain positive progress, makes it easier to grow and improve, eliminates dependency on ability. And that's very important because we oftentimes think that our ability is the determining factor in whether we can do certain things. And what a system does, it helps to eliminate that. Because now all you have to do is follow a process. And once you follow that process, it is the process that actually helps to promote success, not the ability, okay? So protects you from being overwhelmed. And without a system, growth cannot be sustained. I can't tell you how many small business clients that I work with who have come to me and say, we're growing, but we're not growing. I went from 1 truck to I now have 8 trucks. I went from 3 employees to now 17 employees. I went from one contract to 7 contracts, but I'm growing in size, but my revenue flow, I'm still, I went from, generating $380,000 a year to $1.6 million a year, but my net profit is not reflecting that. Why? Because what they have not done is understand how to utilize a system and how to utilize it properly. Okay. So that is very important if you want to grow, and then particularly if you want your finances to grow. So I want to make sure I don't let people forget that we're talking about money here. All right. If you want your finances to grow, this is an essential aspect, because I made this statement, and I often make this statement in seminars. If you are positive every month in your earnings compared to your expenses, your savings should grow every month. If your earnings, meaning your income, is positive relative to your expenses every month, your savings should grow every month. Now, I have to be honest with you. In many of the seminars, when I say this, I get weird looks. And that's telling me that I'm talking to a bunch of people who their savings isn't growing every month. Now, their 401k may be growing every month. You know why? Because the employer takes it out of the check before it gets in their hands and deposit it into the 401k account. And unless the market's going down, which you don't have any control over, but the principal amount of their investment is growing every month. But your personal savings isn't. Why? No system. No system. And your financial situation isn't organized to do that. So when you have a system, this should maintain, a positive growth should be maintained. It will be maintained actually with a system. Makes it easier to grow and improve, eliminates dependency on ability, as I said, and it protects you from being overwhelmed. Without a system, growth cannot be sustained. All right. So let's go to the next slide. So it's no coincidence that when you look at fast food chains, okay, McDonald's in particular, wherever you go, and I've been to McDonald's in Germany, I've been to McDonald's in other places, for the most part, food tastes the same. They have a system. It doesn't matter which one you go to. The McDonald's is a chain that operates with a system. But it's also no coincidence that the top fast food restaurants every year are also the ones who do the most advertising. So they have developed a system, and what that system does is produce consistent results. It also promotes growth. And that's why those franchises that fit this model are able to grow and expand year after year after year after year. So in order to achieve financial independence, we must develop habits and behaviors that are consistent with a lifestyle of being financially independent. Well, what is that? That means that we are at a place where our financial resources are able to sustain our quality of life without dependence on some other source or individual. That's financial independence, right? You're not dependent on a job. You're not dependent on a family. Not necessarily dependent on Social Security, although you may have Social Security, okay? Financial independence is when your revenue source is such that you can sustain your quality of life without dependence on another source or individual. Okay. So in order to achieve that, there has to be a level of discipline implemented, and we have to think about doing things differently than the way we have been accustomed to doing things. It's going to cause a change in our mindset and our mentality, because if our mindset doesn't change, our situation doesn't change. It's just like people who try to lose weight. Okay. And if there's anybody listening to me who's tried to lose weight and had a struggle, the main reason why people have trouble losing weight is because their goal is to lose weight, not to change their mindset about how they live their life. Once a person changes their mindset about how they live their life, which means their diet, their exercise, etc., weight loss is inevitable. I'm actually a living witness of that. I went to the doctor 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now, and I went to the doctor for a hip issue. And they took blood tests and all these things when I went to the doctor, and they came back and told me that I was severe pre-diabetic. And I was blown away because I was an athlete, and all of my life I enjoyed good health. And so I went and talked to the doctor. At that time, I was 205 pounds. I'm 5'9". So that's overweight, period. That's overweight. So I went to the doctor, had a conversation with the doctor, and he said, I don't think you need to be on medication. I think you need to make some lifestyle changes. He never said to me, I think you need to lose weight, although I needed to lose weight. And so I said, well, doctor, I'm glad you said that because I don't want to be on medication. He said, so I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 6 months. This was in March of 2018. He said, I'll tell you what, March 29th, I'm sorry. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 6 months and come back, and then we'll decide, whether or not we need to consider this. So that was in March of 2019. I was 205 pounds. By the end of April of 2019, I was 167 pounds. And I never intended to get to 167 pounds, but I did because I made significant lifestyle changes. To date, I hover between 172 and 175 because I made changes, and I made lifestyle and mental changes to my behavior, and the results stayed consistent. And so it is with us in terms of financial success. If we want to enjoy a greater level of financial success, if we want to leverage our money more effectively, if we want to be able to position ourselves for greater financial stability later in life, there are things that we need to do. Unless you're fortunate enough to have a rich uncle or, rich grandparent who's going to leave you mega millions or, a lot of money, then fine. But there's even a caution that comes along with that. Approximately 85% of lottery winners who hit the lottery for mega millions are worse off financially 5 to 10 years after hitting the lottery than they were before. So coming into a lot of money is no guarantee that that's going to put you on easy street. Think of all of the athletes who've been in the news for having financial troubles after earning tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. So there is a reason why we need to have a mentality that is consistent with the things being discussed here in terms of financial success. Okay. Again, priorities, discipline, system, all are things that are a mindset change. Okay. So again, using a system helps to create habits that cause a conditioned mindset. It's just a disciplined way to do certain things or do things in a certain way. Once we are disciplined, anything we set out to achieve is just a plan away from being accomplished, because we realize that there is a process to implement. And once that process is implemented, it is designed to achieve certain results. That's how big skyscraper buildings can be built. That's how the oil pipeline could be built. That's how new cities and towns can be built, right? A plan. And that plan involves having a system in place, right? So is that it? We got any more slides? Yeah, we do. So the conclusion: without a system, priorities, and the discipline to stay the course, we are unlikely to achieve financial independence. We are unlikely to avoid the financial merry-go-round. We are more likely, if we focus on the principles of financial success, to be successful financially, which of course involve establishing priorities, building discipline, and using a system. So with that, I think we might want to open up the floor for questions.
We do have a couple minutes for questions. We had a good comment here that maybe goes into a question. So for example, you were talking about a filing system. It depends on how much time you lost using the filing system, just in case you might want to find something years ago instead of just going through it until you find it. So kind of speaking to that, do some people kind of get paralyzed by creating a system that might be so complicated that it defeats the purpose of creating the system?
Well, no. So a system doesn't have to be complicated, right? Organization is intended to simplify your life. So the system should be designed in an organized way. If the system is designed in an organized way, there is no way that it's going to take you more time to find something than if it's not organized.
I guess they were talking about the initial investment in time can be a lot to organize it.
Well, I mean, the initial investment in time doesn't have to be a long time, but you gotta think about this. The initial investment in time is probably a microscopic amount of time compared to the long-term arrangements of using the system and the benefits that it provides you over the next decade or more. So yeah, there's no comparison between being organized versus disorganized.
All right, and then one more question here before we have to close. Can you suggest maybe an easy way to get started on doing a budget as far as the system goes?
Yes. So I use spreadsheets, and it's really easy to do that, but you can do it on a piece of paper. So the first thing that you need to do is understand how much, well, actually, the first thing you need to do is to identify all of your expenses, everything: mortgage, rent, insurance, gas for your car. Do you have a cable? Do you have a cell phone? Do you go out to eat for lunch? Do you go out on family nights and eat? Everything that you spend money on, you need to account for. You start with your obligated expenses: rent, mortgage, utilities, things of that nature. You have fixed obligated expenses and you have variable obligated expenses. And again, I do all of this when I work with people because I help them to break it down so that they can understand, some expenses are variable. Again, like your water bill or your electric bill. It's an obligation, because if you don't pay it, they turn the lights off and you got a problem. But it may not be the same every month. So you got to identify your fixed expenses like a mortgage, like your car note, like your car insurance and things of that nature. And then your variable obligated expenses. And then you identify non-obligated expenses, things that like a membership to LA Fitness. That's a monthly membership, but I'm not obligated to keep that. I can terminate that. Okay. My 4 cell phone plans that I have, I'm not obligated to keep all of them. If I need money, I can cut back on something. So I look at my fixed obligated expenses, my variable obligated expenses, my fixed non-obligated, and my variable non-obligated. Then once I do all of that, I subtract that from the amount of money that I'm receiving every month from my paycheck. And then I subtract that from the money that I'm getting in every month from my paycheck. And that number is actually your income. Because your income is not the salary that you receive, nor is it your after-tax money, because that doesn't account for obligated expenses that you don't have an option. Your mortgages, you don't own. I think I mentioned this in the money mindset and money webinar. The mortgage money doesn't belong to you. You sign a promissory note to the bank that for 30 years, you're going to pay them X amount of money, and they didn't make that agreement with you conditioned upon you having a job. So that money legally belongs to them. And if you don't believe it, stop paying them and see what happens. So we can't count that as income. So again, I have a whole process that I go through with people to help them to understand this, but that's how you start with the process of making a budget.
All right. Well, it looks like we've run out of time. I do want to thank everyone for being here. And I also want to thank the organizations that have made our webinar possible today, and for Will for being here. As I said before, you can look to our website for more information about the webinars that we offer, including that mindset and money one at advicechaser.com. And in addition to that, this webinar was recorded, so we will be sending out a replay of this webinar, and you're welcome to share that with friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has agreed to offer an initial consultation for free to anyone that we connect them with. So to find out more, just go to advicechaser.com and click on the link to find an advisor. Well, once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming. And thanks for all the participation. We're getting some thank yous in the chat, Will. And we'll see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.